As one of the most famous whistleblowers in the last century, our next speaker hardly needs an introduction. In 1971, he leaked what came to be known as the Pentagon Papers to the New York Times, revealing that the government had misled the public about US involvement in the Viet Nam War and helping strengthen the anti-war movement. Immediately after the leaks, many people, both inside and outside government, derided him as a traitor. And President Nixon started a fanatical campaign to discredit him, wiretapping his phones and breaking into the office of his psychiatrist to search for materials with which to blackmail him. Since being acquitted of charges, he's remained an active scholar, an economist, and an anti-war activist, and has published 3 books as well as countless articles. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming an American hero, Daniel Ellsberg.
Thank you for being here. It's exhilarating to see a crowd like this on this issue. Let me tell you, I've been in much smaller rallies than this, very much of my life. And in fact, I won't ask for hands, but I think I actually may be addressing a rally now that has some Republicans in it, or libertarians. Is that possible? Wait, I'll take the danger here. Do I see any hands? Let me see. Even one would be nice. Thank you for being here, because I think we have the chance here now for a bipartisan rally that will be the start of a movement instead of the tag ends and the butt ends of a movement. In 2003, we had the largest demonstrations in world history against the aggressive war by the United States against Iraq. And I can't blame people for feeling that after those rallies, 15 million people worldwide in February 2003, but nothing happened. I can't blame them for feeling that being in the streets just doesn't accomplish anything, isn't worth anything. Here we have an issue where we won't get people that number, but I think we can get an active movement of a kind we haven't seen for a dozen years now. In part that's because when Bradley Manning brought out his information, which inspired me very much and which made him a hero of mine. I was asked just the other day on television, and by the way, I don't usually advertise times I've been on, but just this morning I did see one on NPR, which is very unusual for me, a whole 6-minute interview that is worth looking at. One of the questions was, why the reaction to Snowden more than Manning? And I'm afraid there has been a much bigger reaction. And I think the first reason is very simple. What Manning was revealing was what the American empire was doing to other people, to foreigners, to civilians, to innocents, to babies, to people who were being tortured who were not American, to people who were being assassinated who were not American. And I'm sorry to say it as an American, but I don't think it's just an American limitation. I'm afraid it's a human limitation. Simply not to care as much about what your compatriots do, what your colleagues do, to people who are not us, people who are other, people who are different, people who are enemies, even if they're babies, who our leaders say will grow up into enemies. So it's harder to get people. What Snowden is revealing, of course, is something that comes home to us, that affects all of us. And I think there's a potential there for getting Americans, Republicans and Democrats, and Libertarians and Tea Party and others together on this issue to say, we don't want you in our homes, this has gone too far, and the dangers to democracy are too great. And to get people actually to act for democracy. So, what I'm here today is not to repeat the excellent facts you got here from Mark Klein and others. He was one of the first to bring these out. But to point to you some new confirmation that's come out, but also to raise the question of the broader scheme of how we need to think about this or focus this. Russell Tice. How many people here have ever heard the name Russell Tice? Let me hear. I see a few hands. I see about 8 people. Okay. I spent my time on PBS, again, the first time I'd ever been on, interestingly, in 40 years. And I spent the time to use the names that you've heard here before, and they may have gone past you. Veterans of NSA, Russell Tice, who worked on black programs, secret programs, illegal programs involving satellite systems. William Binney, who actually devised the system which they boulderized and took away the privacy protections from it that they're actually using now. Tom Drake, who tried to blow the whistle on this, and Kirk Wiebe, who helped, again, those 4 people, Wiebe, Drake, Russell Tice, and who's the other one that I mentioned?
William Binney.
William Binney, right. And you can add the outsider, Mark Klein, to that. Okay, these people have all said, I, by the way, have been getting more credit than I have in 40 years. All of a sudden, very positive attitude in the media for the first time, which I could lay back and coast on the grounds that Ellsberg did it right. Ellsberg is the good guy. Bradley Manning and Snowden are bad guys. They're very different. They're very different. Actually, I identify with them. I identify with their motives. I totally support. I think the differences between us, which do exist, are essentially irrelevant. But it's a very specific thing that's come up more. Well, Snowden is in Russia. He's not here paying the consequences of his crimes. Well, I don't think he's done any crime at all. I don't think he should spend a day in jail any more than Bradley Manning. But if he were here, he would be exactly where Bradley Manning is now, incommunicado, possibly for years before his trial, no ability to take part in the debate on these issues, essentially being tortured by cruel, inhuman, and degrading punishment, which is in the form of solitary confinement, of course, not confined to Bradley Manning. There are 80,000 people, I believe, in our solitary confinement right now. It is a form of torture for all of them, cruel and inhuman punishment. That would serve no one's purpose for him to be back here doing that. Now, the reason I mention Tice in particular is that he puts in 2 dots to be connected, which as yet, Snowden, I'm sure, knows the answer, but hasn't yet revealed the documents that make it clear. And Tice has been willing to say now, first on Sibel Edmonds' podcast, Boiling Frogs, but more recently on PBS, and that's the other reference I'll give you. Look up PBS NewsHour, Tice and Binney, and the full, not just what they put on the air, but the full interview, which they will give there, in which Tice says as follows. They both agree on the following. They are not just collecting metadata on every American, bad as that is. That does give them enormous power and blackmail power, but that's not what they're mainly doing. They are collecting, as Mark Klein put it, every word you say on email. It's being recorded. Is it being listened to in real time? As President Obama tells us, we're not listening to you. Kidding. To have one person listening to every 2 people on a phone line would take more people than he really has, even in NSA. No, he's Tivo-Ing it. It's recording it all for later retrieval, along with all your credit card transactions, your whereabouts every minute of the day that you have an iPhone on you, etc. Do they have, quote, dossiers, as they deny? A dossier that was written out would be a room full of paper. No, they have just a little sugar cube of the kind that you can keep the whole Library of Congress in now, come to storage, and they can bring it all up when they want to. The other point that Tice makes is that when he was in the government, in NSA, in 2003, 2004, 2005, he had in his hands the full surveillance capability, action, phone calls of staff, home and office of Feinstein and Pelosi and Colin Powell, Secretary of State of the Secretary of State, and Justice Alito, which he held in his hands. Every Supreme Court justice being individually targeted, every member of the intelligence community being in intelligence committees being individually targeted, the people who control the budget and who are supposedly our oversight. Every journalist, every source, every news agency. These are things we don't yet have the documents on. We may, I hope, will get them. Should they be telling these under oath, such things to Feinstein is useless, but let's say to Senator Wyden, Senator Udall, Russ Holt, for example, and should Mark Klein at last be able to talk to them directly? Yes, these are people who are already critical and who need every bit of information they can get, and they have not heard from these people inside NSA. So that's one thing, and Pelosi too, let's see.